Welcome to the Brain Tap Podcast, here to help you relax, reboot, and strengthen your overworked brain. Your host, Dr. Patrick Porter, is the developer of the Brain Tap Pro mobile app, designed to help you sleep better, lose weight, de-stress, or kick a bad habit, all while increasing energy, focus, peak performance, and more. Take the free Brain Tap Pro Challenge. Simply register at braintap.pro. That's braintap.pro. On the Brain Tap Podcast, Dr. Porter brings together a team of experts to share up-to-the-minute news in neuroscience, brain training technology, along with how mindfulness and meditation can be used to improve your life in ways you never imagined possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Patrick Porter.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Cynthia Porter here with Brain Tap Radio. I am basically sitting in for Dr. Patrick Porter, who is in Sweden right now. But I'm honored to be here for this particular podcast because we have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. JoQueta Handy. We've known Dr. Handy for, 5 years at least now. And she's an amazing person doing incredible work. JoQueta is both an integrative medicine doctor and a pediatric speech language pathologist. And she takes a holistic approach to learning, taking the whole child into consideration. She's dedicated her career to helping children with autism to overcome learning challenges. A big challenge for anyone to take on. Her extensive toolbox includes optimizing diet, balancing brain chemistry, and she also has some really innovative educational strategies that she uses that I find absolutely fascinating. I'm looking forward to learning more about that. JoQueta, apparently you have you see a 70% improvement after 16 hours of one-on-one instruction with your educational model, which is an incredible number. I'm so excited to hear more about how you're doing that, especially given what we're hearing so much in the news these days about our numbers in education going down instead of up. So you're doing something that many people need to know about, and so that's why we're thrilled to have you on Brain Tap Radio today. So I'd like to start by asking you to just share with everyone a little bit about your background, how you came to do what you're doing. So go ahead and fill us in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This is just a pleasure. Brain Tap, I've used it in my practice for about 5 years, and it has just been an amazing addition to my toolbox. So again, I'm just really grateful to be a part of this podcast and radio. Let's see, how did I get started in this? I started off on the East Coast, worked in the New York hospitals, moved to California in 1996. And the way that I was trained in New York was very much of an integrative approach. OT, PT, speech, psychology, we all worked together. I was in pediatric rehab, worked across the board from acute care, the NICU unit, so critical care infants, head trauma, kind of the whole gamut in pediatrics. And so it was very much of an integrated approach. We were all intertrained. And so I learned early on, right out of grad school in my practice, that the nervous system plays a key role in language development. And so at that time it was, sensory integration, and that was a big therapy word. So when I came to California in 1996 and started interviewing back in the hospitals and different treatment areas, I immediately got, a big hand. Oh, no, your speech, you don't do sensory integration. That's OT or PT. So I kind of realized I wasn't going to play well with others. And so I moved into private practice with a physical therapist who also was a child development therapist. And he said, I'm looking to prove that sensory integration is the basis of language development. I'm like, I'm your person. Yes, it is. So we began working together, and I'd always had a passion to see children be successful in the classroom. And we had a practice of about 200 families, children. And I began working with classroom teachers, but made the mistake. I didn't go into the classroom. I was on the phone with the teacher and saying, try this, try that. And I would be like, I'm sure you're seeing great changes. And no, they weren't. And of course it was their fault, not mine. Right. So continued on in this way. And I had the wonderful experience in the early 2000s to move to Los Angeles. And I was in a K through 12 school. And the superintendent there at this school was about a 50-year-old school at the time. And he said, you can do anything that you want. You just can't change our curriculum. And so that was a wonderful challenge because I'd only always worked with, we need to modify it and we need to accommodate. And I said, okay. And so this was in a college prep private school. So I went into the classroom and I realized immediately everything that I had been doing didn't work. And I literally threw out 12 years of work and started over. And started over with a wonderful administrative team and wonderful set of teachers who taught me, who truly were my teachers. They taught me so much. And so 3 years later, I was able to say, I have a system that I'm not asking you to try. When I came back into Orange County and the public schools, I have a system that I can prove that it works. And the neat thing is that it works across, the spectrum. It's for all children. So at that time, I had mainly just tried it out on children who didn't necessarily have a diagnosis. It was not with autism. Even though I had worked with that in my practice very much. And I said, this will work for all children though. And so these teachers helped me develop strategies, those hands-on strategies, and it's all around a child's learning strength. And that's why I think it works with all children. When you focus on your strengths, all of us, we're happier, we learn faster, we learn more accurately, we can remember what we learned. And so that's the focus of the system that I developed, the educational system. Came back to Orange County, and around 2008, I was asked by a well-respected family in Orange County to go and build a school for them, to build a school for their son. And I now was moving back into working with autism, and this particular situation was with severe nonverbal, self-injurious, and we started off with 3 children, all that the school district had said, basically unable to be educated. They'd given up on them, and that's why the parents were seeking out something different. Mm-hmm. Implemented these same strategies that I had used at this college prep private school in Los Angeles. I chose teachers that had no background in special ed purposely. They actually had a background on the opposite end, in inner baccalaureate. They were inner baccalaureate trained, and they were also trained as ESL. And when I stepped backwards and kind of looked at why were these teachers so successful with my model? Well, it's because in inner baccalaureate, there is no curriculum. It's a philosophy. And that's what my program is. It's a philosophy. And so when you can take that philosophy and just go and create and develop, that's when we can see amazing things happen. And so now are using it across the spectrum, and with the primary basis being focused on your child's learning strengths.
Okay, that's fascinating. And I love that approach, because we all as human beings have a tendency to focus on our weaknesses. And there's not really much benefit in that. And especially I think sometimes when we look at children who are having trouble learning, we focus on the trouble they're having instead of what it is that will make them strong and that they're the way they're capable of learning. So it's a really great way to look at it. So when did you first realize that some of these kids that were nonverbal and that they could learn, and that they had that they had a way that they could be taught. What was the turning point for you, if you will?
Oh, that's one of my favorite stories. That was actually a child who was one of my greatest mentors. He was 6 years old at the time, and he was nonverbal. He had, I think about 7 different diagnoses. This child had severe nystagmus, meaning that his, eyes, he couldn't hold his eyes straight. They were just constantly moving. I think that probably the room, he couldn't tell us, but I think that, the room moved because the way that he walked was with his hands and his back against the wall. He wore his clothes backwards. He still does to this day. He's about 24 years old now. He did not wear shoes. And he didn't make eye contact. And even when I say nonverbal, I mean, he literally just made more like gross sounds, like grunting sounds. And when we first met, he was on one side of the room and I was on the other. And if I'd move toward him, he would move away. And so when I say our relationship started with tapping, it did. That was literally all I could do, is I would tap the floor and he would tap back to me. He would imitate the rhythm. And it wasn't until one day I followed the advice of a wonderful doctor and mentor, Dr. Jones, who worked all energetically. He was a biochemist and just a brilliant man. And one day when Weston and I were in his office, and Weston had this characteristic that, of course, was labeled as a stimming behavior, is he would pick up a magazine or a book, always had one in his hand, and he would just rapidly flip through it and toss it aside and grab another one. Sometimes the book was right side up, sometimes it was upside down, sometimes he had his head turned half looking at the page. And Dr. Jones made the comment, he was like, wouldn't it be interesting if Weston could read? I'm like, that's not possible. I'm like, look. And he said, okay, but just wouldn't it be interesting? And I said, well, he just has gotten kicked out of kindergarten. He was in a private Catholic school for throwing chairs and tables. So no, I don't think he can read. And Dr. Jones didn't say much about it. He just kind of let it go. And about 2 weeks later, Weston and I were in the treatment room together, and we were both very frustrated with each other. And I had nothing left. I had no tools in my toolbox to pull out for Weston. And I heard Dr. Jones' voice. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to give this a try. And there was a book on clouds laying in the treatment room, and it was probably written on about a 2nd grade level. And I picked it up and I read a couple of sentences. I wrote out a question on a piece of paper, tore it, wrote out 2 answers, tore that in half. I held the question up in front of Weston, and he literally looked at with his head turned out of the side of his eye. And I held the 2 pieces of paper up, and he slapped at the answer, and it was right. And I went back and I wrote out another question. And this time I held it up, and this time he pointed to the right answer. And he began slapping the floor and shoving the book into my hand. And I couldn't read or write fast enough to give him the next question. And it turns out that Weston was a brilliant child. He could read. He could also learn languages rapidly. His mother was from a Spanish descent, and so he learned Spanish in 2 weeks' time. His grandmother was Japanese, and he learned Japanese in 2 months' time. And when we finally convinced the school district to test him, all through receptively, he was 9 years old, and he was scoring at a 12th grade level. So Weston literally changed my career. He changed the way that I looked at children, and I no longer looked on the outside, but I began to look on the inside and began to ask the question, what are you here to teach me? And when I asked that question, every single child has taught me amazing things. And so that, again, Weston was very much of a game changer, a life changer, and is responsible for the strategies that I developed.
Wow. Well, I'd like to just very quickly share a little bit about how we met, because it was pretty interesting. JoQueta had found out about BrainTap through university where Dr. Patrick Porter teaches, and she had gotten a BrainTap unit with her course there, and so we didn't even really know each other. And then all of a sudden, she just started buying BrainTaps from us like crazy. It was like, so we finally said to one of our sales reps, we said, who is this lady? And he goes, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. So he called JoQueta up and said, hey, what are you doing there? And she said she was working with autism. And so when, our sales rep called us back and told us that was it, we were like, okay, we've got to talk with JoQueta Handy. And so we ended up getting on the phone. Well, I'll tell you, by the time she was done sharing some of the stories with us, Patrick and I both had tears streaming down our faces. We were so thrilled to hear that BrainTap was helping these children in the way. So maybe you could share a little bit about that, what you were seeing and why it was that you were all of a sudden selling so many of the BrainTap.
Yes. When I was introduced to it, I actually tried it out on my son the first time. I have 5 children, and one of my children, he was having trouble sleeping. And so I said, hey, I'm not really sure what this is. I just got this, but, it can't hurt. Why don't you try it out? So he tried it the first night, asked for it the second night. And by the third night, actually it was the fourth night, he was like, I'm sleeping. I'm doing great. And so I'm like, okay. He was in high school at the time. I'm like, I'm going to take this into the office and just see what happens. And one of the first children that I put it on, he was actually having a tantrum. And he just completely, he kind of just went dead still. And his mom was like, I'm not leaving here without one of those. And I just saw this over and over again. It was like the learning strategies. It worked across the board for all of the children in my practice. The children with autism, I tend to work with the more severe end. And I think it was more dramatic just because there's so many things that don't work and don't help. And especially in the area of sleep. I mean, so many of our parents are just exhausted and feel hopeless. And so when you can use something that is, they can afford the cost of it, they can take it home, and it's helping with mood, behavior, and especially sleep, that's huge. And so that was literally all I was doing. I said, let me just try this. Let's see what happens. And, if you see that it's something helpful, then we'll go, you can take it home and use it. And that's pretty much every parent wanted to take it home.
Okay. Well, that's great. And we've had an amazing relationship ever since. You and Patrick have shared the stage together since then, and we've had you speak at our events, and many of the doctors, we work with a lot of natural medicine doctors, chiropractors. Many of them are following your protocol. We've had you out to speak to our organization, so it's been a great relationship with you, and such an honor to be working with you and be able to share what you're doing. I know that you do teach other practitioners your model, and that you've identified 5 key components to them, BrainTap, I know, being one of them. Can you just quickly share what those are and
other tools that I use in the practice?
Yeah, just kind of a quick overview of some of the tools that you recommend. Yeah.
Sure. Well, Brain Tap is always the first one that we start with. We have a school here in the practice. We run summer camps, and then we also do individual therapy. And so our first starting place is always with Brain Tap, and I was just so in awe when I went to Dr. Porter and I said, I love this device. I just need some other material. Let me tell you about these kids. And he was like, all right. And, the next thing I know, he's developed a program for us, all around language and learning and working on their fears. And so, yes.
With the encoding specifically for what these children need, the brainwave changes. I know a lot of research has shown that children with autism often have very little alpha brainwave activity, and so he uniquely encoded these to do just that for these kids and help them to balance that alpha back out.
Yes. And I know we're talking a lot about autism today, but I also work with a population of Down syndrome children. And it's just been in the past year of my practice that area has really increased in the amount of children that I'm seeing. And I have been amazed where across the board with the Down syndrome population, we actually had to we couldn't leave the Brain Tap in the treatment room because they would want to do it over and over and over. So saw a huge value with them, working on reading, speech and language, just overall attention. So that I just wanted to be sure and mention that with both populations. Some of the other tools that we use are, of course, the learning strategies. We use that with the child's actual classroom curriculum. We use another program. We use a full nutritional protocol, mainly using Solutions 4 products. And Dr. Nelson has been so wonderful in developing a children's line for us. We also use a program called Interactive Metronome. That's a computer-based program that works on timing and rhythm, and you get real-time feedback. We use low-level laser therapy. We brought that into the practice about 3 years ago, and that's been an amazing tool. Again, I think just everything is complementing. So when we use Brain Tap and when we use the laser, we see that whole nervous system calm, and that allows us then to take the next step of, working on rhythm and timing, and maybe it'll be interactive metronome, or we might go in and work on specific movement strategies, and then of course opening that window of opportunity specifically for the learning strategies and the educational piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Well, we're starting to get close on time, so I just want to ask you a couple more things before we wrap up. One is, I noticed on your website it mentions a 2013 study that found that 92% of parents of children with autism spectrum disorder had PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing to help parents out with that? Because that can be pretty devastating on top of what they're already dealing with.
It is. Yes. I think, that was found by Dr. Yi-Jen when he was running he was actually doing EEG studies. And in the autism population, he started asking parents, hey, can I run one on you? And he found this consistent trend. And, we see also in the special needs population, 1 in every 2 marriages end in divorce. So I think there's just so much stress and strain on a daily basis. They are sleep deprived. And Brain Tap, that's another big piece of it. It's for everyone. It's for the whole family. Dr. Porter and I did a pilot study with the Thinking Moms Revolution, and they're a group of 18 moms across the U.S. It's Canada and Malaysia, and they have children with a diagnosis of ASD, but again, we see the full spectrum. So it was wonderful to work with them over about a 3-month period, and not only did the children make progress, but the parents were reporting, the change that happened in them.
Mhm.
From better sleep to better moods to even illnesses such as Lyme disease and fibromyalgia and all of those things, those symptoms being able to improve. I love one of the moms in that group said it's her digital coffee.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a great way to put it. But yes, this device, again, in working with the autism population, working with the Down syndrome population, because we see some of that same thing, not at that level, but some of that carry over with those parents as well. And so it's a device that you can really use with the whole family.
Okay, fabulous. So before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about what you're up to now, how people who are listening can find out more, how they can connect with you, whatever you want to share. So
okay, well, we're going to Autism One here in a few weeks.
yes, that's right.
Looking forward to that.
For those who don't know what Autism One is, maybe you can share real quick.
Sure. So Autism One it's every year on Memorial Day weekend. It's in Chicago. It's Wednesday to Sunday over Memorial Day weekend, and it is the largest autism conference in the world. So doctors, therapists, practitioners come together to share information. Parents can come, and they make it at a very, very affordable rate. Everything is videotaped, so if you're not able to make it to Chicago, you can follow up on the Autism One website, and for a very small fee, be able to continue to watch doctors. This year, they're actually focusing on chiropractors and providing a whole continuing education for chiropractors around autism.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's really logical. They're I think the ideal to be working with this. Yeah.
I agree. I've always told them I think they should be first responders. I'm married to a chiropractor, and I'm like,
yes.
This is your training. This is your background.
Exactly.
So
there's really a trend in chiropractic toward neurologically based treatments and getting back to really their roots, and it's much more a neurological approach than a bones, moving bones around approach. Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah,
so I know you have a website called Brilliant Learning.
yes.
So maybe tell a little bit about that and
Absolutely. So the drjoquetahandy.com is the website. Right now it has Brilliant Learning. We will be we are redoing that, and we'll be launching that in about 3 months, called the Institute for Brilliant Learning. And that will be where you can go again for $7, $10 or less, and receive daily updates on the treatment that we are doing across the board with all children, from nutritional to brain-based technologies to education. So if you go to drjoquetahandy.com, you will be able to know as soon as that website launches.
Oh, that's really exciting. And you've also started a nonprofit, correct, called Children's Opportunity for Brilliance?
Yes.
So, which is what we based the audio series that Dr. Porter did was based on that. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about it?
Yes, we do. We have a nonprofit that supports all in education, helping children be successful in the classroom. And BrainTap so generously donated to that last year, donated BrainTap devices, which our families have just used and loved. And so that is another way also to give back. We're part of on Amazon Share.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.